Okay, I have been looking at some of your comments about writing your objectives, and I had this planned to do and hadn't gotten around to it yet. So I have some tips and samples and those kinds of things to help you write your objectives. Now, I just can't stress enough how important this writing of the objectives is. Everything you do after this in your whole projects is based on the objectives that you have written. So you need to be sure that they are the way you want them. The other thing is they are not written in cement, and as you go through developing your project, you're probably going to tweak them. You may add some, you may subtract some. As long as you end up with at least 5 later at the end, that's going to be good. But I spend lots of time in the seated version of this class on explaining how to write your objectives. So I'm hoping that this little run through with this information that I've prepared for you here will help you with that task. It's not a natural thing, and you're going to feel like you're kind of in the Groundhog Day movie where everything is the same, but that's okay. You are proving that you can do a skill. The skill has very specific parts. Yes, I know that a lot of the courses you look at don't have all these parts in their objectives, but it's kind of like donning your SCBA. You have to learn the steps first, and then you can break the rules later and adapt the skill so that it works for you. The people who write a lot of courses do the process you're about to do in a very intuitive way. It's kind of like muscle memory. They know what they want to have happen. Since you are new at this skill, you're going to need to have more rules than they show you in some of their samples. So I want to give you some samples here of some objectives that are written so that they would get you good points on your scoring guide, which is important, and so it'll be a little bit easier for you to write. I highlighted some pages in red up here from your IFSTA manual where you can find assistance for writing your objectives. 71 through 76 is in the Instructor 1 information, but it does go through the parts, the condition, behavior, and standard in a slightly different way than it does for Instructor 2, so that may still be helpful for you there. The major model in the box in the middle of page 262. This is where these parts of the objectives come from. Major is the name of the person who kind of formalized this. And 261 through 266, there's a lot of information about writing objectives there. I know you may have read the chapter, but this is time for you to focus in on this section of the chapter while you're trying to write your objectives. The thing that Bloom's taxonomy, the way it relates to all of this, is you need to think about the level of student that you are planning on starting with in your class and where you want them to get to in terms of their thinking levels. When people try and learn things, they start off with the basics. If you look at the knowledge level, that is simply remembering previously learned facts. You can recite information that you've been given, but not be able to clearly understand the information that you're talking about. So that's the knowledge level. You can remember what you were told. It doesn't necessarily indicate that you know what to do with that information. This stage of knowledge does not last very long, but it's the easiest objectives to write. So we end up with a lot of objectives written at the knowledge level when really we want our students doing more with that information than simply remembering it. So depending on what kind of class you're writing, if you're writing a basic level class for people who have little to no information about your topic, you're going to start with the knowledge level. You're going to give them a lot of vocabulary words. You're going to give them the names of tools. You're going to show them how to carry those tools safely, that sort of thing, in that knowledge level. Comprehension means that they can understand or grasp the meaning of the material. They may be able to paraphrase the same information in a different way. They can give you examples of something that fits in with what you're talking about. They can describe things. They can explain them. So comprehension is the next step up from knowledge. Once we get them to have the terminology and the facts, then we make them understand it. We make them understand when they might use it, or be able to give us examples of when something fits into a particular category or something like that. Application is the next step up. It's the ability to use previously learned material in new and concrete situations. And application is where you take the information from knowledge and comprehension and you use it in some way. You may use it to demonstrate something. You may use it to solve a problem. You may use it to predict what the results of an action might be, those sorts of things. If you are working on truly a basic class, these 3 levels are probably as high as you're going to get them in the time that you have available. These are the easiest ones to write the objectives about. It's when you start into intermediate and advanced classes, you've got to get them thinking at higher levels, and that's more of a challenge all the way around. It's more of a challenge to write your objectives. It's more of a challenge to provide the information at that level, and it's more challenging for them to learn the skills at that level. So analysis is the next step up in the comprehension of what they're doing, the thinking levels that they have to use to do the skills and to do the things you're trying to teach them. And it's the ability to break down material into its component parts so that its organizational structure may be understood. They can analyze here. They can associate information. They can go, okay, in order to get on the roof and make a ventilation hole, I have to use what I learned in ladders to get onto the roof. They can discriminate between which things might be the best ways to use to tackle a problem. If you think about a rookie firefighter who is first coming in, you teach them the skills and they can do them at the application level. And when they get on the truck and they ride to the scene and they get off the truck and the officer in charge gives them a direction. Ladder the roof, do your ventilation. Enter the front door, take a right-hand lead, look for the fire. Whatever it is that the officer needs for them to do, they can use their analysis, put the skills they have learned together and do that. But they're not deciding at this point necessarily which skills to use when. They're still being guided by that officer. The officer is working in the analysis level. He's doing his 360 around the building, looking at what he's got and making decisions about what tactics he wants to use to operate here. That's analysis. Okay. Synthesis and analysis are close together. Synthesis is the ability to put parts together to form a new whole. And again, this officer takes everything he knows, all of his experience, and he puts it all together and comes up with his plan. He communicates that to others. He may need to, on the scene, develop an incident action plan. All those kind of things. That's much higher level thinking than is going on with that firefighter who was given a task to do when he got off the truck. Evaluation is the ability to judge the value of material for a given purpose and the ability to make decisions. And evaluation is kind of after you've done this analysis and synthesis, you take a look at the results and you say, okay, is this working? Is this not working? What am I going to have to do to make it work? If it's working, I'm going to leave it alone. If it's not working, what am I going to do instead? So they're appraising the situation, they're drawing conclusions, they're putting judgments in there, they're weighing their options. So as you can see, we're going up the scale of what the student has to do. So you want to be sure that you're writing objectives that are appropriate for the thinking level you expect your students to be able to use. If they're basic students, they'll be using the lower levels. If your class is intermediate or advanced, they should be working more up in application and above. You shouldn't have to tell them a lot about at the knowledge and comprehension level if they're intermediate students. They know the vocabulary, they understand what the tools are and those kinds of things. You might have a new tool that you need to give them a little instruction on, something like that, but for the most part, they're going to be working up in here. So you can write a couple of knowledge or comprehension objectives for those classes if you need them, but make sure that most of what you're doing is up in the higher thinking levels. Okay, if we look at the next page of this document, I have some sample objectives at each of the levels, and I have color-coded them. So you can see blue is the behavior. That is what you want them to do. The red is the condition. What are you going to give them to work with? Are they working as part of a team, or do they have to do it by themselves? Are you going to give them information? Are you going to give them a scenario? Do they have to do it from memory? Do they get to use the ERG when they're working on hazmat situations? That would be a condition. Given an ERG, you do whatever. Or using an ERG, that's the condition. What are you going to give them to work with? Green is the standard. How well do they have to do it? And the standard and the condition are the two hard parts. Everybody can come up with the behaviors pretty easily. It's these two pieces that start causing some problems sometimes. The standard is usually in terms of accuracy or time. So the green is, how are we going to know when this student has successfully done whatever it is we want them to do? And how are they going to know when they have successfully done it? Now, the standard doesn't have to be 100%. Yes, we want the students eventually to be at 100%. But as you know, they're not going to get to perfection in the time you have them in training. They're going to get to perfection with practice, with use, with putting things into place. So what we're describing in the standard is, what is this acceptable level of performance that we can be happy with? If it's a safety issue, you may need it to be 100% accurate. But if it's not, this is where when you look at skill sheets and they say they can miss 2 steps of this skill and still pass, you may have some things that if they don't do this, probably nobody's going to get hurt. It may not be efficient. It may not be the best it can be. That's what we're trying to describe with that standard. Okay? The red condition is so that we can be consistent with everybody. Let's think about hydraulics calculations for a minute. We do a lot of hydraulics calculations not on scene. We don't do a lot of algebra when we're on scene. When we're on scene, we just adjust what we're doing based on the results we're getting and tweak it a little bit. But we have perhaps created a pump chart and done all that back at the station. Well, some people might think if I give them the formulas, I give them a calculator, and they can do that way, they'll understand what they need to do when they get on scene, and all will be well. But somebody else who is really an engineer at heart and really wants them to be accurate may think that they need to memorize all of the formulas and know when to use each one. They may need to do the calculations without a calculator, but we don't want that for our students. If those two instructors are delivering the class, we want them to be consistent. So we make them consistent by saying, this is what you are going to give them to work with when they do this skill. Okay? Let's take a quick look here. On the knowledge one, remember this is just so they can repeat what they've done or what they've seen. Given a drawing of an SCBA is the condition. That's what we're going to give them to work with. The student will match the name of the part with its location on the air pack with 100% accuracy. That's pretty simple. It's not going to take them long to learn that, so 100% accuracy is good. We want them to be able to know the names of the parts. If they're trying to troubleshoot something and they're trying to ask somebody for help or whatever, they need to have proper terminology and they need to know that 100%. And if they can't do that part to 100%, then, higher thinking levels are going to be a challenge for them. So 100% accuracy may be okay. If you have some people who have difficulty taking tests and things like that, and you think 90% or 80% or something is fair, then that's okay. The second one is from memory. We're not going to give them anything. They just have to remember this. With 80% accuracy, the student will match each United States general with his most famous battle. Now, obviously, this didn't come from fire service, but it kind of shows you some different ways to word those condition and standard pieces and different places to put them in the sentence. Again, comprehension. We only have one little green piece here. They have to come up with 2. Okay? That's our standard right there, 2. And from memory again, we're not going to give them anything to work with. On the test, we're not going to make a list and let them choose. It's going to be like a fill in the blank or something where they come up with the information on their own. And the thing they have to do is describe the components of an objective. And I left this will be able to in here for a reason. Sometimes we get too wordy. We don't need to say we'll be able to describe. We can just say the student will describe 2 components of objectivity from memory. And that takes 3 words out of there. Those 3 words do not add anything to the meaning of the sentence. So my suggestion to you is write down your objectives and don't worry about those kinds of things. Get the information on the paper and then go back and edit it down till it's the most simple way you can describe what it is you want them to do, what you're going to give them to work with, and how you want them to do it. If you can get it out of your head onto the paper first without worrying about it, whether or not it's perfect, then you can always tweak it and do other things with it. The comprehension. This says by the end of the semester. You know how we always put at the end of class or at the end of instruction? That has nothing to do with the rest of what we want them to do here. By the end of the semester is when we want them to do it. It's not a condition. It's not a standard. And this particular objective does not have a standard if you look at it. The student will summarize the main events of a story in grammatically correct English. So it says what they have to do, how well they have to do it, but there's nothing there about what we're going to give them to work with. The reason we're so picky right now about all of these parts is if you look at your scoring guide and your practical skill sheet, you only get full credit if each objective has all 3 parts. If you find yourself using things over and over and over, like you're going to probably say with so much accuracy a lot, you're going to probably say given a whatever a lot, don't worry about it. You're going to have to do it to get all of your points. Okay? Let me see if there's any other particular things. Oh, sometimes it's hard to come up with a standard. And so that all critical criteria are met on the skill sheet is kind of a good way to do it when you're dealing with an upper level thinking skill thing where they're going to have lots of steps to do for you. Writing a skill sheet is necessary to be able to evaluate them later. And we're going to talk about that when we talk about testing. But the nice thing about saying so that all critical criteria are met on the skill sheet is if something changes and you change the skill sheet, you don't have to go back and change the objective as well, because whatever the current skill sheet is what you're using with that standard. During a trauma scenario in the sim lab, The reason that this one is a condition and not just a when is we know we're going to be going to the sim lab, so we're going to be using the highly technical mannequins and those kinds of things. That's what we're going to give them to use to do this behavior. So that is why in this case it is a condition, or yes, a condition, but in that other one, it wasn't, because all it was telling us was when they were going to have to do it by the end of the semester. So I hope you can see the difference in those two. Sometimes giving them a scenario is a good condition for your objective. That way you can use many different ways to take them through similar material. For example, in NIMS and those kinds of classes, you may want to start with really easy scenarios, build your way up to what you're finally going to give them in the end, and you can pull out new scenarios all the time. And again, you don't have to go back and rewrite your objective because it just says they're going to be given a scenario. So that makes it pretty flexible and allows you flexibility in what you're going to be giving them to work with. Okay, I hope this helps. If you have questions about your objectives, please go to Ask the Class so that everybody can see what you're posting. So in case they have the same questions, they can just find the answer there. And please try and be as specific as possible in what you need help with. The more specific you can be in asking your question, the more targeted I can make my response, and the more likely I am to answer what you're asking and not what I think you're asking. Okay, there you go. Hope it helps.